Yeah, this is a long one. Try and read
Oh,
through
hell
it.
yeah. Hell
It
yeah.
all came.
Sweet. Goddamn. Sweet. I'm making coffee.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pinned. It's pinned, Mario.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Should get more people in here too. Let's go. Yeah, this is going to be a fun one for sure.
I was really hoping to do a space on the Pelosi body cam footage.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Shit. Wait, is that out?
yeah. Check my tweet.
Oh shit. Oh shit. So tell me about it. Let's talk about it for a sec while we get more people
Well,
in here.
what
It
you see
creates a lot
there
more
is the
questions
guy
than it does
was
answers. I'll tell you that much.
Okay. That's
it.
What are we saying,
interesting.
Jim?
What it does confirm is that Pelosi was half dressed. So
Yep.
that was kind of interesting. They came up to the
Mm-hmm.
door when they opened it. He truly was holding the Pelosi was holding the hammer, the hand of the guy who had a hammer, and then when the police started to walk in, then the guy lifted it up and hit him.
Well,
They-
the dude also looks like he has. I mean, just speculating. You know, he's got a drink in his hand. I don't know what kind of drink it is, but there is a drink in his hand, which is a little weird. If somebody breaks into your house, the first thing I'm going for is probably not, whatever I'm
Yep.
drinking. So
No, it's going to be something else. It's going to be, I don't know, if a guy broke into my house, I think he'd have a knife or something, or a
gun,
gun.
yeah,
Yeah. Or a bat, like any weapon, not a drink in his hand. That's
right.
weird. Like, so all the, those articles about how, Paul Pelosi was having this weird affair with this man, they're probably true.
Either that or it's
Not a
some sort
conspiracy
of male
theory, that things will
stripper.
be
I
true.
don't know. Just speculate. Maybe Brian has some answers for us. Brian?
I don't really. I watched it. Yeah. I don't know what you
Is
think.
it a little weird?
It was definitely sudden. Like it wasn't something that I was expecting to see. I didn't realize that it happened in that way. Like the police were at the door and like watched it
Uh huh.
all.
Yep.
Yep.
That part was in the police report, but they still haven't released much information at all. So.
oh shoot! It looks like Taibbi dumped it all out already. Wow.
Yep. They're all in
Yeah,
there.
it's long. Ian's going to be speaking for a while. Not that you
Yes, I
don't
am.
already speak a lot.
And I want to say for the record, we enjoy it when Ian speaks for so long.
Yeah. I don't talk too much nowadays. But yeah, let's go. Let's get more people in here. Adding Catherine, sorry. She doesn't like being called Cat, Phygital. He's adding folks. Yep, they're connecting. hmm I'm gonna leave room for one in. No dead air, guys. Speak.
What's the Nick? Have you started reading through it, Nick?
Briefly, yes. I had
What's
to
it
get
about?
situated.
What's it
Like, give
about?
us an
Yeah,
overview of
what's it
what
about, man?
we're about to do.
There's not much of an overview yet. I'm 4 tweets in, so I was
Oh,
I'm
okay.
trying to
Interesting.
read through the actual emails too. So
I think it's
it's
about Hamilton 68. It's something about Hamilton 68 because he had been reaching out to a bunch of people who are listed on there.
yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah,
about the Russian stuff again, but I don't know too
yeah.
well.
It's Hamilton 68 is it's an intelligence organization. It's a think tank.
Nice.
I believe that's what it's about. So that's fascinating. I'm gonna put on headphones.
Looks like Yoel Roth pushing back again. Interestingly.
Yeah, a man in a hard place. I'm just opening up a
Well,
bunch of
everyone
different
listening, we're
things.
gonna kick it off shortly. You can click on the pinned tweet at the top to read through it, just giving a few more minutes for everyone else to join, and then we'll kick it off.
That's right.
We're all going to remember the name Alliance for Securing Democracy after this one.
I love that, Alliance for Securing Democracy. Democracy is like a dirty word now. It should be. It should be.
Well, they tainted it.
Anyone that looks at my Twitter profile sees the picture I have on my background, which was an interesting picture I took. I lived in Colorado Springs at the time, and the roads are still there, but the sign's gone. So it's got Democracy, and the arrow points left, Democracy Place, and then Republic Boulevard or whatever pointing right, and then there's a right turn arrow. Like, democracy's, in my mind, an illegitimate form of government. It's Republic that I stand for. But anyway, I always think through these things like that.
There's people DMing me for requests up. I don't see there any requests at all.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to request up, just DM me and the team will be checking it. That's the best way to get up. Just send through a DM and give us a reason on if you've never been on stage before and we don't know you, just give us a reason why you'd like to come up, because we do get a lot of requests. But I wasn't expecting a Twitter Files drop for a while, because the Fauci Files will be next month. So I thought we were going to get a bit of a break, but
Yep. Apparently not.
No rest for the wicked.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if you heard that, Catherine, but we literally woke Mario up.
Yeah,
so there is literally no rest.
Oh, that's why he's yawning.
I literally called him. Called him.
Ian was the first, and my team member Carlos was the second, and then Jim was the third. It's like one after the. I hang up on one, the other one comes in.
Yeah,
I
apologize
tried
for
to
that.
call you, so I think
thought
we all
maybe,
tried at the same
I might
time.
be catching you or whatever, but yeah, Ian was quick.
It's like hitting snooze.
These guys don't snooze. I did get my first haircut. Like, finally had time for a haircut yesterday, and first time in literally 5 weeks. So I look like a human again.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason
it's like we've all been stuck in our homes trying to.
Yeah, but you guys are all in the US. I need another couple of weeks before I'm with you guys. So that means I'm trying to work your hours, living not in the US. That means I wake up at now it's what 10 p.m. So,
yep.
Mario, I lived that life when I was doing business in India. Like, it's exactly the same thing.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I despise it. But at least I stay up till, I went to bed 2 p.m. So I get to see sunlight in the morning before going to bed. So I still get to see it, but not at the same time as everyone else in this country. How long do you want to give it? Ian, maybe another 1 minute, and then we kick it off?
Give it a minute. Yeah, let's give it a minute. My watch is telling me I need to stand up.
But by the way,
I've been walking around all day. What the hell?
Yeah, really. Hey, interestingly, it's going to be fun to see some of the anti-Trump, the Never Trumper crowd in on all this too. How interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've got a scheduled space today, by the way. We've got a space.
7 o'clock.
Okay, so 2
o'clock,
hours.
yeah.
Might have to delay that one. We'll see.
No, not 2 hours.
6
Oh,
hours.
6
Seven-
Okay, perfect.
6
We've got
hours.
plenty of time.
6 hours.
Is that
7 p.m.
that's
Eastern
the
Yeah, we're good.
Project Veritas one, yeah? Perfect,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a good thing you got your haircut because it wasn't going to happen.
Yes, that's true.
Oh yeah. Let me know when you want to start. I'll leave it open.
Yeah, I think we're ready to go. So just for the audience members, I'm going to pin the newsletter above, so you could start subscribing to that. Give it a second. I'll pin it above, and then you can pin the Twitter Files right after Ian when you start. And so I'm just going to do that right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also retweet it on my account, so it's easy for you guys to see it. So I've just retweeted the newsletter. That's number one for the audience. Number two is make sure you ask your questions or give us your feedback. If you're already reading the Twitter files, the drop today, give us your feedback in the comments, bottom right corner. Catherine's trying to come up. Oh, perfect. You brought her up. Yeah, so bottom right corner. Do give us your thoughts, your questions. We do go through them, especially myself, throughout the space. And yeah, we can read them out. But I think let me see if we're ready. Let me check
That's
with
good.
my team. All right, let's see if everyone else is up and going.
Man, you can almost call this the Mockingbird.
What are we expecting from
dump.
these files exactly? What's the drop on these ones?
Hamilton 68.
Hamilton 68. What's the context of that? I'm not familiar with that as much.
They were the think tank that told Twitter. Well, they didn't tell Twitter. It's more like they told the media that they had found Russian operatives on Twitter. Thousands of them, but clearly it was a bunch of BS.
Okay, so we're talking like cyber influence, interference, digital.
Yeah.
Stuff like, okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they were the ones that gave the media, everybody was quoting them. The 2,800 Russian disinformation operatives on Twitter have been located, right? But there's no actual evidence. And so Matt Taibbi is going through them. And he has been doing this research, at least for a couple of weeks now. To my knowledge, he's been asking around for Hamilton 68. Some people I know who are somewhat connected to the situation have briefed me on that.
Are we just going to not talk about Project Veritas in this room then? I saw you going.
That is correct. Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Ian's on that one like a kid to candy, aren't you, mate?
No, absolutely. It's a big deal.
All right, Ian, are you ready to kick it off?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so thread, Twitter Files number 15. Move over, Jason Blair, Twitter Files expose, next great media fraud. Yeah, it's a very interesting title. Number 2. I think, this is a quote, I think we just need to call out the bullshit on that it is, yeah. And it's an email from Yoel Roth regarding the Hamilton 68 account list. And then he says in this email, yes, exactly, it's so weird and self-selecting. And they're so unwilling to be transparent and defend their selection that I think we need to just call this out on the bullshit it is. So to give some context as to what exactly this is, in the previous Twitter Files drop, they were talking to the the State Department, which was trying to get them to ban people and censor people, and they were citing Hamilton 68 as the source of their information, right? And it gave them a bunch of names on the accounts, and Yoel Roth says it's a bunch of bullshit. So number 3. Quote, falsely accuses a bunch of legitimate right-leaning accounts of being Russian bots. And so this is another email from Yoel Roth. It's regarding the hashtag Schumer shutdown, and he CCs escalations, Nick Pickles, and himself. And he writes, hey, blank name, unlike hashtag released a memo, this one was primarily being driven by data from Hamilton 68. I'll do another sweep for spam shortly, but as of yesterday, this looked like the right-leaning hashtag about the shutdown, which only got the label of Russian because the Hamilton dashboard falsely accuses a bunch of legitimate right-leaning accounts of being Russian bots. How we publicly push back on Hamilton is the bigger question, but I don't think there's anything too noteworthy
Ian,
about this hashtag beyond that.
Before you continue as well, can you just give an overview for, I know you just briefly mentioned it, Hamilton 68 for the audience that hasn't been keeping up with the files?
Yep. Right, so Hamilton 68 is a think tank that has been producing research for the media, which the media often cites, claiming that they have found Russian bots on Twitter. Now, the thing about this Hamilton 68 is that it's not transparent in its methodology, so we have no idea how they decided that people were Russian bots. They simply said that these accounts are all Russian bots, and we're just expected to take it at face value. And as Yoel Roth himself says, that a lot of the accounts that were tagged by Hamilton 68 are in fact simply right-leaning accounts. They're not, there's no indication whatsoever that they're foreign actors or Russians in any way or form whatsoever. Unfortunately, the media just simply ran with the stories without vetting the Hamilton 68's methodology or, its sources at all. And that was pursued by Adam Schiff in Congress, who cited these media reports as evidence that Twitter was full of Russian bots, and that's why they needed to be censored. So there was what you call a jawbone, where the media, the State Department, as well as Congress would all pile in on a single entity, in this case Twitter, and try to get them to do something. So I shall continue. Number 4, virtually any conclusion drawn from will take conversations in conservative circles on Twitter and accuse them of being Russian. So I'll read the whole email here. It's regarding Hamilton 68 from Yoel Roth to Nick Pickles and Carlos Monge and a bunch of other people at Twitter. He writes, Carlos, hi, blank name. We produce an extensive description of these accounts during Project Osprey, available here. He links to something. The findings were generally that these accounts are neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots. They're generally right-leaning users. Virtually any conclusion drawn from it will take conversations in conservative circles on Twitter and accuse them of being Russian. The bot check people use a similarly flawed methodology. So the bot check, there's like a website that you can see if somebody's got a bot, like if he's being followed by bots. That's not properly done. That's just a bunch of bullshit, right? It's not tapping into Twitter to decide if a person's actually a bot. There's actually, I forget the name of the app, but the guy who runs it is trying to get a bunch of right-wing influencers deplatformed on YouTube right now. Forget the guy's name. I'm sure some people in the audience might know. But essentially, the way it checks for bots or scans for bots is not really accurate at all. It's just nonsense. It's just guesswork. So he writes, in terms of substance, this is truly a nothing burger. It's just a problem of journalists continuing to lean on deeply flawed tools pushed by people looking to capitalize on the bot media frenzy. But to try to allow us to get ahead of some of the Hamilton 68 nonsense, I'm working on our own internal version of it. You can view it here. He links to something. He says, DS colleagues, please feel free to add new things that you may be interested in the dashboard. So dashboard colleagues, I guess. The Hamilton accounts are all in Presto. Presto is some sort of app that they use. Interestingly, there are already some discrepancies between the hashtags they tout on their site and the ones we're seeing in our own data. Certain hashtags like hashtag Israel and hashtag Trump appear to be completely blacklisted from the Hamilton dashboard. These and other inconsistencies, coupled with a total lack of transparency from the GMF team about their methods, point to a major unmet opportunity to try and educate our communications and government partners about the flaws with tools like Hamilton. Nick, you should help advise on that, Yoel. So that was number 4. Number 5. These are all quotes by Twitter executives about Hamilton 68, a digital dashboard that claimed to track Russian influence and was the source of hundreds, if not thousands, of mainstream print and TV news stories in the Trump years. One of the articles is, this is from the Alliance for Securing Democracy. This is the GMF that he was referred to. And this is an article from August 2, 2017. The title is Hamilton 68, a new tool to track Russian disinformation on Twitter. So this is something that they're working on. The GMF is basically Hamilton 68, to my understanding. I might be mistaken, but I think that's the case. The Hamilton 68 is the name of the dashboard. It's made by the GMF. Yeah. So Matt writes, this is number 6. The dashboard was headed by a former FBI counterintelligence official and current MSNBC contributor, Clint Watts, and funded by a neoliberal think tank called the Alliance for Securing Democracy. Right. So yeah, that's exactly what I just said. Number 7. The Alliance for Securing Democracy Advisory Council includes neocon writer Bill Kristol, of course, the former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. Now, if you're not familiar with Michael McFaul, he's the guy constantly saying that Putin's probably going to get assassinated or that Russia's failing, that Russia's losing, like the guy just promotes anti-Russian disinformation, right? You can fact check his stuff and find that a lot of it is just BS. And then there's ex-Hillary for America chief John Podesta. Yes, that John Podesta. He's also part of this group, the Alliance for Securing Democracy, as well as the former. Sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was just going to say he was the former chairman of the Hillary Clinton campaign for president.
That's right. Yeah, that John Podesta. Yep. And then the former heads or deputy heads of the CIA, NSA, and the Department of Homeland Security. I shall read their names. Is Mike Chertoff, Tumas Ilves, David Kramer, so Bill Kristol, Michael McFaul, Michael Morell, Anna Palacio, and John Podesta.
What number? What number is this
outlet?
All right.
Number 7. This is number 7. You can actually see the screenshot of all the people who are part of the advisory council for the ASD. That's the Alliance for Securing Democracy. They're the ones who produced Hamilton 68, which is a dashboard that purports to identify and locate Russian disinformation campaigns and agents on social media. Now, according to Twitter itself, Yoel Roth says that none of the people they identified are actually Russian. They're simply right-wing accounts. So it's funny when, somebody gets accused of being a Russian disinformation agent when they're literally just a Trump supporter or a DeSantis supporter.
Strategically, that's a smart strategy. Create an organization, call it something sexy, and just start pointing fingers at Russian disinformation, putting Twitter in a tough spot to take action. Do you think they intentionally they knew that, were they just incompetent, or they knew that these were not Russian disinformation accounts? What's your opinion on this?
I would say it's a combination of both. A lot of it is preconceived bias. So they kind of assume that any conservative who was promoting anti-woke talking points or pro-Trump talking points must have been a Russian, because there's no way any American supports this, right? That is basically the point of view of these people. And so therefore I would suggest, I don't have evidence of this, but I would suggest that their methodology is completely flawed. They see somebody tweeting about Trump, they think, oh, he must be a Russian bot, because there's just no way he's an actual supporter of Trump. These people are nuts.
Let's continue going through this. We're up to number 8, and I just want to welcome Tracy. It's been a while we haven't had you on stage, and I got Tracy Justin up as well. All right, guys, let's keep going through this, and then we'll start discussing it. Go ahead, man.
I'll continue. Yeah, it's long. Yeah, so number 8, news outlets for years cited Watts and Hamilton 68 when claiming Russian bots were amplifying an endless parade of social media causes, such as when people, conservatives are against the strikes in Syria. That was when Donald Trump attacked Syria. A lot of conservatives were opposed to it, right? Even supporters of Donald Trump were opposed to it. In support of Fox News host Laura Ingraham, weird, she's fine. Okay. And the campaigns of both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. So you supported Bernie Sanders, you're a Russian bot, right? This is a Democrat talking point, that if you support either Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, you must be a bad person. And they cite 4 articles here as an example. One from MSNBC, where it says, one tiny corner of the U.S. government pushes back against Russian disinformation. And then they write about some group called Polygraph, the part of the U.S. government to counter the Russian propaganda machine. You wonder what that is. Another article from the Washington Post, written by Amanda Erickson, reads, Russia-linked accounts are tweeting their support for embattled Fox News host Laura Ingraham. Why would Russia care about Laura Ingraham? I don't know. Political magazine writes, the Russian bots are coming. This bipartisan duo is on it. Jamie Fly and Laura Rosenberger crossed party lines to track the Kremlin propaganda campaign. Tweeters on the far right and far left aren't happy about it. It's typical. They lump everybody in together. You must be a Russian if you support Bernie. And another one from the Securing Democracy Dispatch is a special edition about the Mueller indictment. And of course, it cites the findings of Clint Watts, who is, of course, Hamilton 68. And they said that anyone who is criticizing Hillary and supporting Bernie Sanders or Trump must be a Russian bot. And that the Russians are behind any sort of pro-Bernie campaign or any kind of pro-Trump campaign. So number 9. Hamilton 68 was the source for stories claiming Russian bots pushed terms like deep state or hashtag. So you say the term deep state, oh, you're a Russian bot, right? That's why Louis Mensch calls everybody a Russian bot. Or hashtags like hashtag Fire McMaster, hashtag Schumer shutdown, hashtag walk away. So if we can get Brandon Straka in here, that'd be fantastic. He's the leader of the Walk Away campaign. He's a great guy.
I'll message him.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, send him a message. Yeah, get him in here. Basically, they said that he was a Russian disinformation bot. That's very interesting. No, he's not, obviously. Hashtag release the memo, hashtag Alabama Senate race, and hashtag Parkland shooting, among many others. And he cites more articles here. One is Fast Company, where it says, hashtag Fire McMaster, not Damore. Twitter bots are thriving and they're more lethal than ever. That's from Fast Company. Another one is from CNN, where it says, Russian bots are using hashtag walk away to try and wound the Democrats in midterms. Crazy stuff. Politico writes, Russia pushes more deep state hashtags. So you just talked about the deep state. Well, you're a Russian bot now. Mother Jones. Yeah, even they fell for it, despite being on the left, far left, I would say. They're saying Russian propagandists are pushing for Roy Moore to win. So you supported Roy Moore against the Democrat? Well, you're a Russian bot. Sorry. Number 10. The secret ingredient to Hamilton 68's analytical method? Well, here's a list. Our analysis has linked 600 Twitter accounts to Russian influence activities online, was how the site put it at launch. And there's a screenshot of Hamilton 68 dashboard and how they did their work. So this is by J.M. Berger and Laura Rosenberger, who write that in the Federalist Papers, number 68, Alexander Hamilton wrote of protecting America's electoral process from foreign meddling. Today we face foreign interference of a type Hamilton could have scarcely have imagined. And Hamilton 68 Dashboard, a project with the Alliance for Securing Democracy and the German Marshall Fund for the United States, seeks to expose the effects of online influence networks and inform the public of themes and content being promoted to Americans through a near real-time look at Russian propaganda and disinformation efforts online. And one of the things that he has highlighted, it says here, the way they did it is like our analysis has linked 600 Twitter accounts to Russian influence activities online. They don't really go into much detail beyond that, besides showing like hashtag numbers. So number 11. Hamilton 68 never released any list, right? Despite claiming that the Russians were simply shut the accounts down. Like, so they have an excuse for everything. They'll say, oh, we can't really release a list. The Russians already shut it down. They're so smart. They're sneaky. They're ahead of us. All those reporters and TV personalities making claims about Russian bots never really knew what they were describing. So there's no actual names, right? They didn't actually name anybody. They just named a few hashtags. And so here's a screenshot from number 11, where he quotes an article where it says, for what it's worth, Rosenberg and Fly disclose their methodology on their website and say they can't reveal the list of 600 accounts they are following, or the Russians will simply shut them down. Other researchers of whom I've spoken say the tweets and messages found by Hamilton 68 certainly are consistent with what we've seen from Russian-linked accounts. Rosenberger, who spent years in the Obama White House and the State Department, laughs at the idea that she is a neocon plant. And though it's true that their advisory board contains both liberal Russia experts like former Obama ambassador to Moscow, Mike McFaul, as well as a favorite Greenwald Benoit, the original neocon Bill Kristol. Goofy. Number 12. Twitter executives were in a unique position to recreate Hamilton's list, reverse engineering it from the site's requests for Twitter data. Concerned about the deluge of Hamilton-based news stories, they did so, and what they found shocked them. Okay, interesting. So here's an email that Joel Roth wrote. I found their API key, which is a mysterious art I can't quite describe. So he actually managed to hack them, kind of, like what they were using to trawl through Twitter's data. He figured it out. He's a smart guy. And he said, and I looked at all of which user IDs they were passing as parameters to the user timeline endpoint. So that's how he did it. And somebody asked him, says, curious, what's the methodology for reverse engineering the accounts? 644 accounts. And then Joel Roth replied, he says, at long last, I've been able to reverse engineer the list of accounts behind the Hamilton 68 dashboard. The Securing Democracy people have never been willing to release the list to anyone. The full list is here, and he links to a Google Docs. I doubt it's active anymore. And then he gives a TLDR, which is too long, didn't read, quick explanation. Well, the dashboard includes 648 accounts as opposed to the 600 they claim, and the selection of accounts is bizarre and seemingly quite arbitrary. They appear to be strongly preference pro-Trump accounts, which they use to assert that Russia is expressing a preference for Trump, even though there's no good evidence at all that any of the accounts they selected are not actually Russian. So let's discuss a strategy for how we want to use this information. I think it can help us refute a lot of thinking in DC based around the dashboard. So they just selected 600 accounts at random who happen to be pro-Trump. Those are the Russian bots. That's how they decided these guys were Russian. So, according to Taibbi, these accounts, they concluded, are neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots. No evidence to support the statement that the dashboard is a finger on the pulse of Russian information ops, partly illuminating massive influence operation. Those are a bunch of quotes from this email, which I shall read as follows. The first one is the one I read earlier. And the second email, it says, here's the methodology. It looks like they picked 600 accounts that they believe are aligned with Russia and then check what they tweet. And then somebody else asks, Dell or Joel, Dell is one of the other executives, says, do you have any ideas on this? And Nick Pickles replies, thanks, I've not discussed them, but having looked at it, the sample set looks pretty small. It looks like the most shared domain is only being shared 138 times in 48 hours, and the most shared URLs are 38 times in 48 hours. It's hardly illuminating a massive influence operations. It's just a bunch of random people, really, just tweeting random links. That's it. That's nothing untoward about it. So in layman's terms, Mike Taibbi explains, the Hamilton 68 barely had any Russians. In fact, apart from a few RT accounts, right, that's Russia Today, It's mostly full of ordinary Americans, Canadians, and British. It was a scam. Instead of tracking how Russia influenced American attitudes, Hamilton 68 simply collected a handful of mostly real, mostly American accounts and described their organic conversations as Russian scheming.
Did Matt drop out? Ian drop out? He dropped out, but I like what... when he dropped out. He's back. But I was just want to say, Matt himself called it a scam. Brian, it's going to be a tough... Is Brian there? Yeah, Brian's going to be a tough one for you today, man. You're in a bad spot, man. You're screwed on this one.
No, I can't support any of
you gotta give it. You gotta give it a shot, man. Like the audience. The audience needs a reason to hate you, so you have to find a way to support it.
They're all waiting for me to somehow figure out a way to.
Don't worry, I can be contrarian just for the heck of it.
Cool. You must be a Russian bot then.
Oh, good.
So it's 25. We're up to 15 out of.
a Russian bot.
15 out of 25, correct?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
Let's get through it.
Oh, no.
Elon just tweeted, shame on MSNBC for misleading the public, and he linked to the Twitter files.
The jabs begin.
Oh, sorry, I mean Mr. Tweet. Mr. Tweet, I mean, sorry, not Elon.
Yeah, number 15 now.
By the way, there are 42.
Oh, shit. Okay, yeah,
42?
There must have new ones. Right.
Okay, I'll keep going. Better keep going, yeah. All right, number 15. It was a scam. Instead of tracking how Russia influenced American attitudes, Hamilton 68 simply collected a handful of mostly real, mostly American accounts and described their organic conversations as Russian scheming. It's insane. Twitter immediately recognized these Hamilton-driven news stories posed a major ethical problem, potentially implicating them. Quote, real people need to know that they've been unilaterally labeled Russian stooges without evidence or recourse, Roth wrote. Good for him. He said, this is a big, messy strategic issue that Nick should weigh in on. The short version is I reverse engineered a whole bunch of a full list of accounts using the dashboard during Project Osprey, and we did a full analysis of them, and the Securing Democracy people's claims are totally bogus. They don't know that we have the list, though, and they've refused to release it. I'm increasingly of the opinion that this dashboard is actively damaging and promotes polarization and distrust through its shoddy methodology. It's toxic from a partnership standpoint, but my recommendation at this stage is an ultimatum. Either you release the list or we will. It needs to be peer-reviewed. Real people need to know they've been unilaterally labeled Russian stooges without evidence or recourse. It is a major problem. So good for him. I mean, he wanted to do something about this. I don't think he actually released a list, though. Neither of them did. Sad. Number 17. Some Twitter executives badly wanted to out Hamilton 68 after Russians were blamed for hyping the hashtag Portland shooting hashtag. One wrote, why can't we say we've investigated and citing Hamilton 68 as being wrong, irresponsible, and biased? This is one of the Twitter executives who wrote that to Yoel Roth, right? No idea who this person is, but they're not happy about this. And Yoel Roth said the challenge is that they haven't released the account list, and we only have it because I reverse engineered it by looking at the API traffic. So any refutation will require us to admit to having obtained the account list. So a bit of a tight spot here. They have to admit that, okay, we kind of reverse engineered you because you guys are dumb and I'm really, really smart. My name is Yoel Roth. I'm super duper smart. I could hack people, right? But so it would look kind of bad if they did that. And they didn't want to piss off too many people. So Yoel Roth wanted a confrontation. My recommendation at this stage is an ultimatum. You release the list or we do. However, there were internal concerns about taking on the politically connected Alliance for Securing Democracy. Now, keep in mind, this is a bunch of Hillary Clinton, not necessarily even supporters, but like they're her brains, right? They're the people directly behind her. You got John Podesta on there, Michael McFaul, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very influential people. Number 19, quote, we have to be careful in how much we push back on ASD publicly. ASD, again, is the Alliance for Securing Democracy. Said the future White House and NSC spokesperson Emily Horn. So she was actually warning them. This plus one to all. From a communication standpoint, she used to work at Twitter, by the way. We're working extensively with reporters off the record and on background to explain the flaws in Hamilton 68's methodology without getting into the full knowledge of it, and to press them to encourage Hamilton 68 to be more transparent on their methodology. I don't think they were ever pushing back on any of it. They were just more than happy to promote the Russian disinformation narrative. So Carlos and others on policy have been pushing back similarly with congressional staff. Until we have our own comparable but high-quality analysis to point to publicly, though, we have to be careful in how much we push back on the ASD publicly. Number 20. Quote, I've also been very frustrated in not calling out Hamilton 68 more publicly, but understand that we have to play a longer game here, wrote Carlos Monge, who is the future senior advisory to the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. So, now he works at the White House, but back then he worked for Twitter. He was an executive. So, number 21, Matt writes, so the legitimate people, as one Twitter executive called them, never found out they'd been used as fodder for mountains of news stories about Russian influence because the hashtag Twitter files contained a list they've begun finding out. Oh, boom. So Matt Taibbi's got the list. Sweet. Awesome. Right. Nice. Number 22. I'm shocked, says Sonia Monsur, who as a child lived through a civil war in Lebanon. Supposedly in a free world, we have been watched at many levels by what we say online. This is somebody who responded to, I believe, to Matt Taibbi. Number 23. I've written a book about the U.S. Constitution, says Chicago-based lawyer Dave Chitokas. How I made a list is incredible to me. So this is one of the people on the list. I just named 2 people on the list. Another one here from another American. It's an Oregon native named Jacob Levitch. He says, when I was growing up, my father told me about the McCarthyite blacklist. As a child, it would never have occurred to me that this would come back in force and broadly in a way designed to undermine the rights we hold dear. So that's an American, right? He was on the list. He was one of the quote-unquote Russian bots. Even Twitter executives were stunned, and this is Matt writing again, even Twitter executives were stunned to read about who was on the list. Wrote policy chief Nick Pickles about the British comic Holborn Lulz, right? Holborn Lulz is a pretty popular British comedian. He jokes about stuff on Twitter. He's a wind-up merchant. I follow him, and I wouldn't say he's pro-Russian. Can't even remember him tweeting about Russia, says a bunch of people that were interviewed about Holborn, right? Holborn is, unfortunately, no longer with us. Number 26. I'm listed as a Russian bot, ? Said conservative media figure Dennis Michael Lynch. As a proud taxpaying citizen and a charitable family man and an honest son of a U.S. Marine, I deserve better. We all do. So this is a man, again, is a podcaster. He's on Newsmax. He's on Fox News. And he was cited as a Russian bot. They call him a Russian bot. He's not. Number 27. Consortium editor Joe Lauria was too angered to find out that he was on the list, which targeted voices across the spectrum. He says, organizations like Hamilton 68 are in business to enforce an official narrative, which means excising inconvenient facts, which they call misinformation, right? And this is a guy who has written for the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, the Sunday Times, and he's the editor-in-chief of Consortium News, and they called him a Russian disinformation bot or a Russian disinformation operative. He's not. Number 28. What makes this an important story is the sheer scale of the news footprint left by Hamilton 68's digital McCarthyism. Now, I think that's unfair to McCarthy, because the people who are on McCarthy's list turned out to be members of the KGB eventually. But it's a pretty fair comparison if we're going back to, historical comparisons. So he says, the quantity of headlines and TV segments dwarf the impact of individual fabulists like Jason Blair or Stephen Glass. So those 2 guys have been fired, right? I mean, they were making up stories. But nothing they did is even in comparison to this Hamilton 68 thing. And in his screenshot, he literally puts out like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of these articles citing Hamilton 68, which is all based on bullshit. So number 29. Hamilton 68 was used as a source to assert Russian influence in an astonishing array of news stories. Support for Brett Kavanaugh, for instance, that was considered Russian disinformation. Supporting the release of Devin Nunes' memo, that was also Russian disinformation. Talking about the Parkland shooting, the manipulation of black voters, attacks on the Mueller investigation, all these things, all considered to be Russian disinformation. Complete nonsense. Number 30. These stories raised fears in the population, and most insidious of all, were used to smear people like Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard was smeared as a foreign asset and drum up sympathy for political causes like Joe Biden's campaign by describing his critics as Russia-aligned, right? So they smeared Tulsi Gabbard, called her a Russian operative or Russian asset, and smeared anyone who even dared to criticize Joe Biden. So you don't like Joe? Well, fuck Joe Biden or let's go Brandon, and suddenly, oh, you're a Russian bot. Incredibly, and Matt writes here, incredibly and ironically, these stories also frequently used as evidence of the spread of fake news on sites like Twitter. For instance, on Mother Jones, where they said Trump supporters spread the majority of fake news on social media. A new study finds that junk news has been a staple of the MAGA crowd. Again, total bullshit. No evidence that any fake news is spread by any Trump supporters to any large degree, but that's what they did. They basically used this to disenfranchise anyone who supported Donald Trump, anyone who supported Tulsi Gabbard, or even Bernie Sanders. If you went against the narrative, went against the establishment, you're a Russian bot, you were promoting disinformation. Matt Taibbi writes, "It was a lie. The illusion of Russian support was created by tracking people like Joe Lauria, Sonia Mansour, and Jay Shostakovich. Virtually every major American news organization cited these fake tales, even fact-checking sites like Snopes and PolitiFact. Wow, imagine that. PolitiFact getting something wrong. Snopes getting something wrong." And the articles from PolitiFact writes, "Russia's social media efforts in 2016 were not just false, but inflammatory." Wow, doesn't it? And Snopes writes, "Trolls, bots, and useful idiots attacked new committee aimed at exposing Russian propaganda campaigns. So you spoke out against it. You are part of a Russian propaganda campaign. Anything bad happens in the world, Russian propaganda. Hiroshima and Nagasaki get nuked, Russia's to blame, right?" Twitter didn't have the guts to out Hamilton 68 publicly, but did try to speak to reporters off the record. "Reporters are chafing," said Emily Horn. "It's like shouting into a void." So they did try to speak to these reporters, these supposed journalists, who none of them actually did their jobs, right? And this is an email to Nick Pickles, Carlos Monge, and Yoel Roth. And it says here, "For now," this is what Nick Pickles wrote, "For now, I think we can cope, but I think consider sharing information or publishing anything that we should loop them in." And then someone else replies, says, "Perfect. Do we need somebody from legal to join as well?" And then Nick says, "Let's loop Lauren in." And then Yoel Roth says, "Yes, please. I'll be in Boulder, but feel free to schedule any time. Time zones have no meaning to me." And somebody else writes, "Discussed a bit with Carlos today and would love for us to sync early next week, if possible next steps forward regarding Hamilton 68. Given the internal and external pressure we're under, I think we need to huddle on the best way forward. Reporters are chafing at our off-the-record cautions and methodology. And the Florida stuff this week really drives home for me that Hamilton 68 is going to keep being fast, sloppy, and their damage won't be just restricted to Russia stuff. Nick, I know this is more your lane. Happy to schedule something, but defer to you." And then this is an Emily Horn email, I think. It says, "I'm reaching out to individual reporters who are covering this to try to shape, but at this point, it's like shouting into the void." Right? That's what Emily wrote. So they had no opportunity, really. The journalists just weren't listening. Roth was offended by the idea that tweets on certain themes suggested subversion. Quote, "Can we talk about how incredibly condescending if you talk about these themes, you must have been duped by Russian propaganda?" That's what he said, right? He's a smart guy. So his email reads, "Can we all pause for a moment and acknowledge how incredibly condescending that third bullet point is? If you talk about these themes, you must be duped by Russian propaganda." Ugh, that's what he says. And this is an email to him, and this is, I guess, a point that says here, this is what he's responding to. He says, "To Yoel's comment, I don't think they claim that all the accounts are clearly Russian or bots. Some of the accounts on the list are clearly Russian, such as RT or Sputnik or the Russian embassy. From their website, these are the types of accounts they cover, but I think most of the accounts on this list would fall into one of these categories, which are vague and broad enough that they are somewhat hard to rebut. But this gets covered in a very different narrative in the news, such as Russian bots, and loses any nuance." So, and these are the 3 bullet points. Attributed accounts is the first one. Attributed accounts that clearly state they are pro-Russian or affiliated with the Russian government. That's the first point. Second point, accounts including both bots and humans that are run by troll factories in Russia and elsewhere. And number 3, accounts that are run by people around the world who amplify pro-Russian in themes, either knowingly or unknowingly, after being influenced by efforts described above. So it's complete nonsense, just like Yoel Roth says. It's like, oh, so you talked about Biden, the Hunter Biden laptop? Well, I guess you're a Russian bot because, that's clearly a Russian disinformation effort, right? Number 35. We're almost done. It says here, Matt writes, "Again, even Roth, like most Twitter executives, is an ardent Democratic partisan. And he saw the Hamilton scheme would lead people to assert that any right-leaning content is propagated by Russian bots." So here's what he wrote in this email. This is regarding an article from Business Insider on #release the memo. That's the Devin Nunes memo. Yoel Roth writes, he says, semi-related. "The Hamilton dashboard is once again getting a lot of traction around partisan trends, which is leading people to assert that any right-leaning content is propagated by Russian bots because Hamilton 68 said so. Nick, I think it may make sense for us to revisit the idea of more actively refuting the dashboard. It's a collection of right-leaning legitimate users that are being used to paint a polarizing and an inaccurate picture of conversation on Twitter, right?" So number 36. at least 2 other research institutions that use similar methodologies and were cited as as sources in news stories were also criticized in email correspondence by Twitter. MSNBC, Watts, that's Hamilton 68, the Washington Post, Politico, Mother Jones, which did at least 14 Hamilton 68 stories, the Alliance for Securing Democracy, and the offices of politicians like Dianne Feinstein all refused comment, unless this counts. So Matt Taibbi has reached out to all these people. None of them will talk back to him, except for the Alliance for Securing Democracy. So Matt put out a tweet. He says, question for Mike Morell, Bill Kristol, Selected Wisdom, Isles Tumas, Michael McFall, Anna Palacio, John Podesta, and others. Are you really going to no comment my upcoming story about Hamilton 68 and at Security Democracy? I have the list. Time to come clean. And, the Alliance for Securing Democracy actually replied. He said, you can find information describing Hamilton 68's methodology, published in 2017 and 2018. That's the same bullshit that we read earlier.
Matt, we're almost through the thread. I think we're up to number 37.
Yep.
There's like one more tweet left. That's
There's
an
3 more,
job, by the way.
Yep. Fantastic work, man. Fantastic stuff. All right, let's go through this. This is an academic scandal as well. At Harvard, Princeton, Temple, NYU, GW, and other universities promoted Hamilton 68 as a source. And, it's a Clinton Watts on C-SPAN talking about it. It's in the university libraries where they talk about Russian interference in the 2018 United States elections. That's the university libraries and a whole bunch of other sources. 39 here. Perhaps most embarrassingly, elected officials promoted the website and invited Hamilton experts to testify. Dianne Feinstein, James Lankford, Richard Blumenthal, Adam Schiff, and Mark Warner were among the offenders. And so they actually cited this stupid group that promoted actual disinformation as experts. Number 40. The mix of digital McCarthyism and fraud did great damage to American politics and culture. News outlets that don't disavow these stories or still pay Hamilton vets as analysts should not be trusted. Every subscriber to those outlets to write to editors about the issue. They should write about them. They should, go and complain to the New York Times, go and complain to Politico, go and complain to any of these websites that you pay a subscription fee to and tell them to stop citing these guys and to come clean. So, number 41, and this is basically done. It says, for more information on Twitter files, follow Barry Weiss, Lee Fang, Schellenberger, and the FP and others. Twitter had no input on this story. Searches were conducted by a third party, so material may have been left out. For more on this story, read the detailed news story at racket.news. And special thanks to Orf for putting together the video for this segment. Much more to come. So thank you, Matt, for joining us. Good to have you here.
Matt, can you hear us?
Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
Bottom left corner, you can unmute.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
sorry.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
that's an interesting thread.
Yeah.
What were your first thoughts when you went through all these files before writing the thread?
Well, so I was looking for something else in the files, and then I came across this discussion by the Twitter executives talking about what to do about Hamilton 68, and I think I was pretty struck by the language that Roth was using, calling it bullshit, and then the fact that they actually had the list, which had been kept secret, was really interesting. So. A lot of us, if you go back and look, there were obviously probably some people in this room who wrote about this at the time being probably fake, but now we know for sure that it is. So, that's always good.
The list that you're referring to, is that the same Google Doc that was within the files, or is it a different list?
So no, that's just like a partial. The Google Doc in the files. There's an Excel doc that has 644 names on it. I don't believe that's in the thread.
There
is it?
No, it's not in the thread. Yeah, we didn't link to it.
I think I got a bit of an.
There's a different one that was, one that Yoel Roth put out. That's obviously not active anymore.
Right. Oh, I see. Okay. No, that's probably a mistake on my part. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But no, it's a. I didn't publish it because I was a little bit worried about the issue of people being smeared as Russian bots. So I've been reaching out individually to people, and I've been kind of giving the list or trying to give the list to media reporters. In the hopes that they'll start the process of unwinding some of those stories. The problem is there's so many of them that it would take a while.
What has the response been like from the media reporters that you've reached out to, Matt?
Without getting into the names, I'd say a couple have been polite, but so far nobody's expressed interest in actually doing the story. I mean, really, almost every one of the major media reporters would have to be writing about stories that took place in their own newspapers or at their own television stations. So that's problematic. Right down to the Washington Post, New York Times. I reached out to a couple of reporters at the Times who did the New Knowledge story, if everyone's familiar with that. That was the story about a group that's affiliated with Hamilton 68 that got caught faking a Russian influence campaign in Alabama. So it's my hope that maybe they would do this story as well. We'll see. I'm still working on that.
Matt, do you know if Twitter has reached out to these 600 Twitter accounts to offer an apology or preemptively fade off a lawsuit?
I don't know that. I've started the process of reaching out to the real people on the list. Not a lot, but some of the accounts are no longer active. Some of the people have died in the meantime. But there were a few people who I contacted who asked about, do they have a case against somebody? And I don't know, because the thing is their names were never used publicly. Really what this was really all about was they were trying to create the appearance of kind of like Russian activity just by tracking a bunch of ordinary, mostly Trump supporters. So even though these people were used and put on a list, their names were never put out there. So yeah, I don't know about that.
I would think that it would fall more on Hamilton 68 than it would Twitter, since Twitter was sort of like turning it down, saying, "Hey."
What would you say would be the motivation?
So Matt, do you believe, based on everything you've read, that these actors that were behind the think tank were nefarious?
Yeah, it's a good question. We were having that debate earlier, Matt, on whether that was just incompetence or preconceived bias or a mix of both.
So I don't think there's any way that you can look at the list and see this as an honest mistake. The accounts are overwhelmingly English language accounts. Many of them are clearly real people. Many of them are well-known figures. Again, they put David Horowitz on the list. They put Joe Loria from Consortium on the list. They put like a Newsmax guy on the list. And a lot of them are kind of sort of, mid-level accounts that had maybe 5,000 followers that are supporting Donald Trump. They're clearly real people. Twitter didn't have any problem figuring that out quickly. So I really doubt that they don't know.
So just before you, Catherine, before you ask your question, I just want to say David, who was mentioned in the thread, he's on stage with us now, and also the Walkaway campaign was also mentioned in the thread. Matt and Brandon Straka's with us now. I see your hand, Brandon. I'll just give you the mic right after Catherine, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up that David and Brandon are with us. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because I'm trying to figure out what that motivation would have been for them, because, if they're sort of lower level accounts, it doesn't sound like they're going after these specific accounts to try to take them down. So do you think it's all just about creating that perception, or were they, in your view, sort of targets for them? What are your thoughts on that?
No, this was a media scam. It wasn't really about these people. This was entirely about creating the perception of ongoing kind of Russian bot influence. And so it really was almost immaterial who the people on the list were from their point of view. What they did basically is, and again, you see the quotes from the Twitter people, talking about this, they were just capturing ordinary American political conversations and then just telling reporters that these were Russian influence. And the goal here was not to smear the people on the list. The goal was to smear the general idea, right? So if you want to say that the HR, the Fire McMaster hashtag was Russian influenced or walk away or release the memo or whatever it is, that's what they were after, was trying to smear those things, or the Tulsi Gabbard campaign for that matter. I think that was the end game, not the people on the list.
I have a question before we go to Brandon. Do you know if there were any government requests to take down or suppress anybody who was on the list?
No. I mean, again, the list was pretty carefully guarded, and the only people who would have had access to it worked at Hamilton 68 or the Alliance for Securing Democracy and Twitter, right? So unless you were one of those entities, you probably didn't know who was on the list. And again, who was on the list was less important than how the list was used. It was really about creating all those news stories. So I don't think the government got involved in that aspect of it.
Another question. Do we have any sort of correspondence between journalists and Twitter regarding the Hamilton 68 dashboard and their reporting on it?
We do. There are some... there are a couple of, actually more than a few, emails from reporters many of them who ended up doing stories. There are a bunch surrounding the release the memo hashtag. And again, as I think I put this in the thread, you see in some of the emails, like there's frustration by the comms people at Twitter because they're trying to tell them off the record to stay away from the story and they won't do it. They're saying things like, reporters are chafing. It's like shouting into a void. We're not making progress with them, that kind of thing. So there are a bunch of emails about that.
Do you know why Yoel Roth ultimately decided not to release the list? Is that disclosed at any point?
So he went back and forth a number of times. At times he was very much in favor of being confrontational. Then there was a point in the emails where he was concerned that they might find out that he had reverse engineered their list. I don't know why he would have cared about that. I haven't had any luck reaching Yoel, obviously, but he seemed to go along in the end with the general idea that they had to tread carefully with the Alliance for Securing Democracy.
Do you know if any of the journalists have actually requested to see the list?
Right after Catherine, I'll give the mic to Brandon. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Matt, did any of the journalists, as far as you're aware from conversations you might have any of them actually requested for any kind of evidence or wanting to see the list of people, that to kind of assess whether they're bots or not, any kind of evidence that they asked for?
So, neither at the time nor this week when I reached out to a whole mess of them and said, I've got the list. Do you want to take a look at it? Did any of them express interest in seeing it? So that should tell you a lot.
That's fascinating. For me, that's the biggest surprise, Matt. Like I know there's a lot of bias within the media, there's conflicts of interest, etc. But that's for them to still be ignoring the story and for them to ignore Twitter back when the whole Russian disinformation story was being published is mind-boggling to me. But I do want to give the mic to Brandon, and anyone from the audience that has questions for Matt, put them in the comment section, bottom right corner. We can ask them on your behalf. Brandon, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
I'm in a house
perfect,
with terrible reception.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, great. Thank you. Thanks, you guys, for allowing me the space to speak. Matt, I believe you and I talked weeks ago in a different space. And I gave you a little bit of background about Walkaway and this very thing. So first of all, thank you so much for doing this. And to be honest,
can you hear him, Matt?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, I'm just going to stand right where I am and not move. Basically, Matt, what I was wondering is, I mean, to give a little background maybe to some of the people in the space too, I started Walkaway in 2018, and they began this Russian bot narrative around late summer that year. This was just a few months after I started it. And I kind of told you before, I mean, I was very naive at the time. I was just, a normal guy who had this experience. I made that video. I started the group. I encouraged other people to make testimonials, and it blew up. I mean, Walkaway is a very real thing with real people telling real stories. And the success of Walkaway eventually parlayed into an organization, the Walkaway Foundation, which I run. I have employees. And the damage that's been done to Walkaway and to my organization is very, very, very real. I mean, to this day.
Yeah, I think it dropped out.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
I know. I got a phone.
Yeah, I can hear you.
To this day.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
To this day.
I'm sorry, guys. I think because of this, everybody's calling me. So to this day, when we try to do events, when we try to do initiatives, when we try to fundraise, when we try to do anything, we're inundated with people mass posting these articles saying that Walkaway isn't real. It was never real. It's Russian propaganda, and encouraging people not to support my organization, not to donate. I mean, this has had very, very serious and very real consequences. And so, I literally just started getting people calling me. I haven't read the thread yet. I've gotten a few bullet points on it, so I'm going to go back and read it. But essentially what I wanted to convey two things to people listening, that this isn't funny. It's not a joke, which I thought it was in 2018. I thought it was silly, and but it's obviously much more sinister and serious than that, and it has very real consequences. And the second thing is, Matt, I imagine you're inundated since you've been doing this with people who want to talk to you, but I would really like to talk to you. And if you would please shoot me a DM,
sure.
10 minutes of your time, I would like to talk to you. Could you please shoot me a DM? And I'd love to set up a call with you if that's okay.
Absolutely. And I apologize for not getting in touch with you beforehand. There were a lot of people to reach out to with this one, but yeah, absolutely. And by the way, there was a question earlier about like legal causes of action. So like your case is an area where you might start thinking about injury, right? Because it probably hurt your political organization. It probably injured your reputation. But I don't know who the party would be. It might be the journalist, right? I saw there were a number of newspapers and online outlets that wrote about Walkaway in this way. And sometimes it was a racial thing. Like I think the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote something very strange about Walkaway. So yeah, it's not funny. It's very serious, and I'm sorry that happened to you. And there's a lot of stories like yours, unfortunately.
I want to give the mic to Brian. By the way, we've invited Tulsi Gabbard as well. Her team is trying to reach her to get her to come onto the space.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear us, Matt?
Yeah.
I don't know if Matt, hold on. Let me see if Matt, can you hear me, Matt, or no? No, he can't hear me. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Matt a question.
Well, can we make sure, can Matt hear anybody?
Matt, can you hear him speaking?
Oh, yeah, he can hear everyone except myself. So yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so thanks for being here, Matt. I just had like two questions. One of them is, do you see this list from Hamilton 68 as a list of people that were knowingly connected, that Hamilton 68 says were knowingly connected to Russian intelligence, or possibly unknowingly? Because I feel that could make a difference in the way that these people feel, because somebody could be posting things that Hamilton 68 thought was considered Russian propaganda without actually being connected to the Russians. Because everything I've seen says that Hamilton 2.0 is a list of people knowingly and unknowingly connected.
Well, look, I mean, I think they got to do better than that, right? Like
yeah, no, I'm not like trying to support them. I'm just curious your thoughts.
Again, the people who are involved in this, we're talking about, you know, the front man is a former FBI counterintelligence official. The think tank has a former head of the DHS, a former acting head of the CIA, and a former deputy director of the NSA on the advisory council. It defies belief for me that they would put a list together of ordinary people that didn't have some kind of connection to Russia and call them Russian. You know, and clearly they weren't asserting anywhere that they had any evidence for any of this. I think they just thought that this list would never get out. And again, if you look at their reasoning for why they didn't release the list, Laura Rosenberger, who was one of the founders of Hamilton 68, she said, "Oh, if the names ever got out, the Russians would just shut the accounts down." Well, you know, you can go ask Joe Loria or Dennis Michael Lynch or any of these other people if they're going to shut their accounts down now, right? I mean, they're clearly not Russian-controlled accounts. I think this whole thing, it's very hard to explain other than as a conscious deception. And I put it to them that way when I sent them a letter. I said, if there's some kind of rational explanation for what you did here, I really want to hear it. And they refused to answer.
That one is first. Can you hear me now, Matt, or still no? Yeah, he can.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, because I've got a couple other things to do. But I would mention, Brandon was mentioning what damage it was, and it was only 2 days ago that I talked to Matt about this. But I've got a website that's actually devoted to the Constitution of the United States, and I've written a couple of books, one about the Constitution, one about the Declaration of Independence. Prior to 2017, primarily through Twitter, I was selling 200-300 books a month, and the traffic on my website was about 30,000-40,000 people a month, and we're generating income as a result of that. The fact is after now, in retrospect, now that I've seen what's going on and having talked to Matt, I now get maybe 400 or 500 hits a month on the same website. I sell maybe 1 or 2 books a month. The subject matter of my stuff doesn't get any more American than the stuff that I do. And this action actually destroyed that. I was always fascinated. I could never understand what happened. But somehow or other. Yeah.
Is this Dave?
Yes, it's Dave.
Dave, yeah. So that could be a couple of things. Like Twitter, when they did an analysis of the sites on the list, they found that about 1/5 of them had already been labeled. You can see this actually on the Substack piece that I wrote. And about 1/5 of those sites had been put on what they call the Trends blacklist. So that's a form of shadow banning, which means that there were a lot of accounts that were probably already shadow banned when they were put on the Hamilton 68 list. Maybe for other reasons, like it could have been for something as stupid as you retweeted something that Donald Trump said that they labeled, right? And that might be how it happened. Like I doubt there was a direct relationship between Hamilton 68's list and Twitter's shadow banning, because Twitter is actually very skeptical of the list. So it was probably related to something else.
Okay, well, after having talked to you, I started looking at things, and I was always mystified by the automatic drop in traffic and the automatic sales drop in my books about the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and it almost coincides with the timing that you talked about. that you showed to me. Maybe there's no relationship, but it certainly looks like it.
So Matt, roughly, prison in the same place for years,
yeah,
and that started roughly around this time. We haven't quite figured out exactly what was going on in terms of why they were labeling people. If you see the list of things that they were doing for labeling, like most of them were like there are some obvious ones, like not safe for work, right? So that's usually porn, like some kind of really hardcore porn. But they started applying these labels like Trends Blacklist or Search Blacklist a lot at some point around that time, and it's still kind of an unknown for us why they did that.
Okay, well, thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you, and I really appreciate you having reached out to this. People really need to know
the phone. Yeah,
the kind of back work you're doing on this is just amazing, and I'm just all I can do at this juncture is say thank you to be shedding light on this important topic. With that, I have to go, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to bring me on here, and thank you for the work you're doing, Matt.
If you want to come back within the next few hours, we'll still be here.
You'll still be there? Okay. I'm actually going into a meeting about an election lawsuit, so I got to go, guys.
Excellent. All right. Good luck. See you in a bit.
Thanks for joining us, David.
Bye.
That's why
Matthew,
it always
welcome back to the
baffles me.
panel.
It always baffles me, Matt, when people say things like, why doesn't Elon just release everything all at once? I guess they don't understand the work that it takes and the effort that you guys are putting in to sort of decode all of this stuff and also make sure that people don't end up in litigation or in trouble for releasing certain information.
Yeah, I mean, like Twitter could still end up in trouble for a lot of stuff. So, that's one more reason everybody thinks he's on all the time. But, he's taking a risk by letting us just forward around in this. So, I'm not going to question it, but I think he wants to be as transparent as possible. So,
yeah, I agree.
Speaking of foraging, if you don't mind for a sec, I really want to ask. My name is Matt Termon. I'm on the board of Project Veritas, and we were very high-profile, ignominiously turfed off of Twitter, both James O'Keefe, the founder, and our institutional accounts from our C3 and our C4 project.
Folks, I have a call. I've got to go. I'm sorry, but thanks for having me on.
Hey, Matt. Message Mario if you can.
And please shoot me a DM.
Matt, thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks, Matt.
Matt.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Matt.
Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Bye, Matt.
Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Please shoot me a
Thanks for joining us, Matt. Yeah, guys, don't do that. That's not cool. Everybody does speak
that was
all at
you
once.
and Mario.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I didn't speak at all because he couldn't hear me the whole time, so that's why Nick took over.
But you were thanking him for joining us.
No.
Yeah, I got Prodigal up as a speaker. He's got some good takes. He's got some insights. But I mean, the rest of you,
jump in, Prodigal.
I'm just working on some articles right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
I think Matthew was speaking. I don't know if he wanted to finish what he was in the middle of saying.
I asked him if he had come across any of the Project Veritas internal emails about Project Veritas from Twitter, because they had to do a real calisthenic and backward somersault to justify their ban of us, which was that we were doxing people based on our man-in-the-street interviews of subjects because we showed a lamppost somewhere with a number on it in some town, and they said that, we were going after people's privacy and doxing them, and that's one of the ways they got one of the accounts out, when at the same time concurrently, CNN was going to random Trump supporters in Mississippi and going to their door and not blacking out and redacting, their house number and things like that. So I know there was a debate inside Twitter on how to get rid of us, so to speak. And I'm curious, if anyone, whether it's Barry Weiss or Matt or any of the others, Michael Schellenberger, who have had access, and if any of them are listening, we've been debating it internally at Project Veritas since it happened. What was the backward somersault calisthenic they did internally? Like, how did they, on such a flimsy basis eject us? And obviously, thank God for Elon coming in and bringing back the digital free speech space, the town square, the speaker's box and speaker's corner. Historically, that is unfettered free speech. Thank God for it. But Twitter, what all these journalists are exposing, that David Sachs and Elon are doing with them to get them the information so they can really do a forensic on this horrible anti-democratic and constitutional behavior. But if anyone here knows any of the figures who are doing deep dives into the back and forth internally, we would love to know at Project Veritas, because we obviously expose Twitter. Right now we're exposing Pfizer, and there's crickets in the media. I know that Mario and crew are going to be doing a large Twitter space to deconstruct some of that with some of our team in the next hour or two. But I've got two of my PV staff texting me as Matt jumped off, as I mentioned Project Veritas, with coincidence, because this kind of stuff happens to us a lot. So I don't know. I'd really like to know the answers to now that we have the ability to forensic audit their decision making.
But
I think Trump would probably like the same answers.
Yeah, well, as independent media, we believe we have a more important role in our democracy to play than politicians.
I'm saying he was our sitting president, and he was effectively banned without reason, and then the reason given was a complete lie. When you look back at his last tweets, they were not inciting violence. He was telling people the exact opposite, but no one was able to even go see it because he was already banned.
Oh, 100%. But I mean, look, this is in the era of them combating fake news. And, Mario and the crew here, Nick, we've talked about this in Brazil. They'll use that as an excuse and a cudgel to censor their opposition because they want to deplatform. And if we're actually terrorists, which, by the way, is the new buzzword, the Soviets called everyone subversives that they had to silence. But if we're actually terrorists, then they have a moral high ground, right? They have the moral imperative to silence us. So, I mean, they've been using this fallaciousness over and over. Steve Cortez, close friend of mine, did an amazing deconstruction of the Charlottesville hoax, and Prager did a whole video, and Steve wrote it up in Real Clear. And I urge people to read, the spinning of a fallacious interpretation so as to justify
Matt, if possible, because this is about the Russia thing. I just want to focus on one thing that I think is left out in this discussion. A lot of people are applauding Roth. He knew this, and he never leaked it. He never reported it. And there's two reasons for this. Both his company benefited with these alliances, with both the government and these NGOs staffed by the surveillance state. And it also benefited his political allies. And I know a lot of people in the room are upset at economic and reputational damages they've suffered at this, which I think is definitely wrong and they should be sued. But the more important issue is how this affected both domestic and foreign policy. And this led to Russian sanctions, to ranking up of geopolitical tensions. And now we're literally sleepwalking towards World War III. We're sending over tanks. They're going to want jets next. And that in part is because this type of silencing of info, of truth, of opposition views has allowed this anti-Russian rhetoric and propaganda, which, might not have been justified prior to Ukraine. I don't think it's still justified now, to basically subsume the American consciousness. And they basically affected our policies domestically and foreignly. And I'll end with this. Some big tech platforms have removed safeguards for protections that they award other groups and people, and specifically allow anti-Russian hate against their people, threats, etc. And like I said, Roth, to me, does not get a pass. He knew this. He researched it. He could have leaked it. Even if he didn't want to do it to certain media organizations, I'm sure The Intercept or maybe even The Guardian or The Independent, if he didn't want to touch anybody who was considered right-wing, would have done anything. But he didn't because he benefited from it. And, he doesn't get a pass.
Well, let's just put a cherry on top of that point, because what's really at stake here, even though, we've had Operation Mockingbird and other attempts for the federal government to get involved in what's being told about in the media, and ostensibly back then they were doing it to really tamp down what they thought was Russian propaganda. That attempt has been there. There's not this desire anymore in the federal government and the actors that we're seeing involved in what we're finding out on the Twitter files. There's no patriotic motivation anymore. It's not like, okay, we want to protect the country, and this seems a little odd to do it this way, but we're just really concerned because we want to protect the country. That idea and attitude doesn't exist anymore. We are now in a new age here in the United States where there are very real attempts to adjust entirely the whole narrative of what's being talked about. And with social media, this is really the first time in American history where you can put the steroids on that effort. It kind of existed since we had 3 networks and limited newspapers in the 70s and 80s. Now everybody's connected to it, and they can do it to everyone all at once when they have control of these platforms. That's a huge, huge change in American history. We're seeing this play out in other countries, but man, is it playing out here for the first time. And that's why it's so important that we really isolate and talk about this stuff.
I would like to propose a theory to try to account for Hamilton 68 and who they are and what they're doing. So just following a few breadcrumbs and putting this together with some of the information that we've gotten on Discovery and Missouri v. Biden, it seems to me that Hamilton 68 is not just a left-leaning nonprofit with some powerful liberals or neocons on their board, but this whole thing strikes me as a propaganda operation coordinated and executed at the level that only intelligence agencies are capable of doing.
Oh, I mean, Hamilton 68 is made up of all these guys, so former CIA, former DIA, former DHS. Yeah.
Just so. So this new merger of state and corporate power and these quote-unquote public-private partnerships that we've seen at work, basically enhancing and protecting the power of unelected bureaucrats at our federal agencies. We saw it at work during the pandemic. We're seeing it play out here as well. I think Hamilton 68 is nothing but an extension of the intelligence agencies into the private sphere in order to advance their own interests. I mean, if you look at the people that they targeted people who were sufficiently influential that, knocking them around a bit could create a story, but not sufficiently powerful or wealthy enough to challenge either Hamilton 68 if they were discovered to be behind the feeding of information to Twitter, or much less challenge the social media companies themselves in any meaningful way, legally or in terms of public influence, just telling the story of what happened to them. And so this has all of the fingerprints of a sort of fifth generation propaganda campaign as gamed out and perfected by the CIA and the National Security Agency and the other administrative state/deep state actors who have literally been perfecting this kind of mass propaganda for decades and learning how to, and they seem to have perfected this with the social media companies starting probably around 2017, 2018, and basically figured out the whole game by 2019, 2020. And so while I can't prove that hypothesis, I would like to put it forward as the interpretive hypothesis that seems to account for, in my opinion, it seems to account best for the data that we have on hand. I'm willing to be persuaded out of that interpretation, certainly. I'm sort of at the preponderance of evidence and not the beyond reasonable doubt stage of believing my own theory. But I'd like to just throw it in the mix for discussion.
Yes. Yeah, so I was just gonna say, like I don't at all agree with them releasing names of Americans who obviously were not bots, were not directly connected to Russian disinformation campaigns, were not directly connected to overseas operations. It does, Hamilton 68, it does say that the dashboard at 2.0, it includes users, and I touched on this with Matt, who were unknowingly acting in favor of Russia. So, for instance, if I'm just pro-Russia and I retweet and interact with a lot of content pro-Russia, I think that would have gotten you on this dashboard. Not saying it was right, but I think it's important to understand that when examining the list and where they were coming from. I don't know why they would list people like that, because it's just going to create
Well,
all
if our
sorts
own
of trouble.
media won't
But
cover
Brian,
the
do you not
stories.
think these people are smart enough to cross-check this list? You know, at least parts of it, pull out random names.
But I don't know if their intention was to leave out Americans.
Of course, it was their intention. If they did it to the sitting president of the United States, they smeared his entire campaign and presidency as a Russian person. It's very easy to dismiss people. It's very easy to dismiss people and what they have to say, even if it's the truth. If you can say you're a Russian bot, you're a Russian spy. I go into a space. They say that to me. They say I'm a Zionist. They say I'm a Nazi. So they don't have to listen to the truth.
So let me just finish my point. So they were releasing this. They didn't. I don't think they purposely released a list. Maybe I'm wrong there. Can somebody correct me? I think the list kind of leaked at first. But what they claim the list is actors working directly with Russia, but also actors who unknowingly are working with Russia, and that can be anybody.
Anybody who's anti-war, anybody who wants energy,
anyone who's anti-war,
it doesn't justify it.
You know, and it does not justify it all. But I think that context
the methodology is flawed, right?
I think that context is important in determining.
Brian, have you ever heard of plausible deniability? Do you know what that is? You give a reason so the useful idiots in the public can say, no, this is why, when your real intention is something else. Aaron expounded on what I said earlier, and it's true. If you look at this in the context of the actions and how it's affected both domestic divisions and geopolitical tensions, there is no excuse for this. We're on the brink of World War II. They're silencing American citizens. They've weaponized the government and our own tax dollars against us. And you're saying, well, maybe they had good intentions. No, it's called plausible deniability. It's clear you don't know how.
That's not at all what I'm saying. Prodigal. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not actually saying that. I think they were wrong in every respect. I'm just saying that the information that they released, their intent was to point out both accounts that were connected as well as unknowingly connected. And I totally agree. They shouldn't have been.
That's the danger. You see, I mean, the methodology that they used to determine if somebody was a Russian is flawed. Either flawed or just completely bullshit. They never actually released the methodology. I read the page where they talk about the methodology. Doesn't actually go into any sort of granular detail about what constitutes a Russian narrative, right? So
it
so
seems
vague,
like that
it would be
Russian
pointless.
narrative was anybody that tweeted Schumer shut down or hashtag walk away or release the memo.
That's why Brandon Straka was painted as a Russian operative. I mean, this is unfair to him.
Yeah,
exactly right.
Honest here. This is entirely a Russian narrative. Is any narrative that goes against what they perceived as the Democrat or progressive way of thinking. I mean, let's just be honest about it. It was entirely about that. Was never about.
Well, let's be fair. Lindsey Graham loves the Russian war too, right? This is the military-industrial complex. This is a surveillance state. They intercepted an article
and you had both
in October
Republicans
that this was
and
going to be
conservatives
expanded to anybody against COVID, to anybody who talked about the Afghan withdrawal, to anybody who has misgivings about Ukraine and what we're doing there. This was just the impetus they needed, and they made sure, just like everything else, plausible deniability, go against anybody who can get the truth out, because who's going to be able to afford to fight a preliminary injunction, appeal it in states courts, appeal it to the Supreme Court? You're talking about millions and millions of dollars. This is a concerted effort. These aren't stupid people, right? These are some of the most smartest, well-educated people trained in the way of statecraft and how the government agencies and our lawfare works. And this was done on purpose to say, no, these people are much smarter than almost a lot of people on the stage, including myself. They know what they're doing. They just count on the stupidity.
I need to jump in for a second. I really take issue too with what Brian said about, well, that maybe they just, it's people who unknowingly were associating with Russia. If you don't know something, you ask. No one ever contacted me and said, look, are you aware that you're engaging or that you're spreading this
misinformation?
I don't
disagree at all.
No one
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that's
I understand, but you're kind of giving this impression like, oh, it was just sort of like they just sort of accidentally, put out some
I don't think it was an accident. I think that they used data flawed data most likely to find this information. And I'm not
But why
supporting
would they
what
not
they did.
ask if it's such a threat?
I don't think it's
if
flawed. I think that it's flawed on purpose. It's
So
flawed by
quick,
design.
quick question.
Well, you have to.
But if there's a legitimate threat, if there's
Sorry, I muted everyone, but I saw Brandon was speaking by himself. Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
No, everybody's speaking.
Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was just saying that. Thank you. If there's a legitimate threat or a legitimate risk, if we're talking about like a security risk, why are they putting out these lists? Why are they doing all this without even contacting the people who are on the list? That's bizarre to me. Why would you not contact me and say, "Hey, what is your relationship with Russia?"
I have a question here. So, Brandon, I think that I don't know, because no social media platform contacts anyone they suspend. But then again, branding someone as a Russian operative. Did they use flawed? What did Twitter reach out to Hamilton, Ian, through the files? And what was the response they got? And what was the response they got?
A Stonewall.
So that's the question I would have, Brian. Like, Brandon has a Russian name, so I'm joking, Brandon. But like, Brian, if they reached out to Twitter and Twitter did not respond to them, Twitter reached out to Hamilton. Hamilton team didn't respond. How can you say that was accidental? If the social media platform, media platform will know their algorithm the best, and they're reaching out and they're saying, I'm guessing, Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're saying, because I had the same thought process as you, Brian. Like, I went through that whole thought process throughout the file drop. And if they reached out to Hamilton and Hamilton ignored them, and this is the platform that runs the algorithm, Hamilton, it should be the other way around. Hamilton should be reaching out to Twitter to say, hey, this is the information we have. Can you verify it before disclosing it to the media?
Yeah, no,
what do you think?
I agree. I'm not saying that what Hamilton did was right. I'm just saying that it's important to understand the context of what the list was, because people were claiming that the media was reporting that this list was all Russian bots, and I don't think they were reporting that. They were reporting that this list were users connected.
They're counting on the media to be imprecise. They're counting on the media to be imprecise by saying that everybody on this list is one of three different things. One, they're 100% Russian, which is confirmed, like people who work for the Russian embassy who are on this list. But this list did not differentiate those actual Russian accounts, government accounts, for instance, with Americans who were just simply tweeting stuff. So it is unnecessary for them to even do that, right? Because ideally they would do that, but they didn't do that on purpose. So that way they could just say, hey, 600 accounts, all Russian, right? And the media doesn't even ask who these accounts are. They just say, oh yeah, they're all Russian.
Yeah, and like Mario said, I think the responsible way to deal with it is, hey, reach out to Twitter. Say, hey, these are accounts that we think are connected to Russia in some way or other, whatever their data shows. Share that data with Twitter, and then see what Twitter says. And they should have done that.
I agree with Matt Taibbi, right? I agree with Matt Taibbi. This is not so much a Hamilton 68 issue, which, obviously they're going to be a very politicized think tank. They are there for a specific purpose, which is to discredit any conservative, right? It's a media issue. The media should have done their job to ask questions. Okay. They should have contacted Hamilton 68 and say, hey, can you verify all these people? Can you tell us who's actually on the list and what your methodology is? None of them wanted to do it, right? That's why Matt Taibbi has been reaching out to all these journalists, or all of them who wrote these articles. None of them have contacted him back.
The media gets around it.
Hamilton.
The media gets around
it. Hold on. Aaron, just before you go, Brian, what's your thoughts on the media side? I want to see if there's a good defense there.
Yeah, so I think the media gets around it, and I'm not saying this is right, by just quoting what Hamilton says. So they quote, according to Hamilton, it says this and this and this.
But why
and
didn't
then they can run with
but
the
why
story,
didn't they?
Not have to
why didn't they react to Twitter reaching out to them? Because I'm guessing they kept publishing the stories even after Twitter reached out and says, "Hey, this is an accurate." Is it just this? Is it a mix of the?
No, I'll give you two reasons. Two reasons, Mario. Reason number one, they're fucking lazy. Journalists are fucking lazy. As a rule, journalists are fucking lazy motherfuckers who would use ChatGPT to write their articles if they could, okay? That's reason number one. Reason number two, it supported a narrative. The Russian disinformation narrative was strong. It was what was bringing them clicks. It's what CNN was been banking on for years and years and years since Trump was elected. Even before he was elected, they were saying Russians were influencing the election. So they were more than happy to perpetuate this. And furthermore, if they went against it, then they would have to basically say, hey, we were wrong about Trump. They don't want to do that because all their careers are on the line. Their credibility is on the line. So they got to perpetuate a narrative in order to preserve their own credibility. And they're lazy.
And by the way,
reason number six.
There's one thing we're not talking
reason
about
number 6,
or seeing.
Listen.
We're not seeing immediately in what we just saw today. we didn't find out what's the connection with Facebook and Google and what they were doing at the same time. So you'll notice that they're having to push and claw at Twitter to do things. And I mean, I'm not trying to make Yoel Roth out to be some hero, but what's interesting is they hadn't built this in to their system in the way Hamilton 68 wanted. And what that leaves the question for is how ingrained and maybe even participatory was Facebook or Google in what Hamilton 68 was doing. Listen, the overall narrative here was their system was not flawed in the least. Their system was precise, I believe. It
was designed to be that way.
That's right. They wanted every bit of the narrative of everything that was being talked about in the American public through the media or otherwise to be anti-Trump and more generally anti-MAGA and even more generally anti-conservative, and because their purpose was to and we knew this. Listen, Peter Schweizer did that Creepy Line documentary a while back, and in that we found out that they were already using PSYOPs on the Facebook and Google platforms, which, by the way, Twitter's not mentioned in that documentary. It was Google and Facebook that were doing it, tracked by a Clinton supporter and verified by him. They were absolutely in on the game. That game expanded as we are finding out here. The purpose is to change the entire paradigm of what mattered, to also make certain things, you talk about conspiracy theories, to make certain things look like conspiracy theories that weren't, so that they could take the upper hand in the dialogue. That's what's going on here, and that's the thing that hopefully we can find more out about. But this is really scary. I'm really concerned. I think that we've broken this a little bit, and some of it's breaking down through the Twitter files, but there's so much more work to do because, like you mentioned, Ian, the media is all over this. They're totally bought into this. They really are a propaganda machine, and then this just gives them more
I mean,
fuel.
Jim, when you have General McChrystal from a leftist pack using DARPA to attack any messaging that may be coming out of the right or any truth that contradicts the left and the pro-military war and narrative establishment, it's a problem. These NGOs, people don't realize. The intelligence community, they use a number of things for cover, whether it's diplomatic status, whether it's NGOs, whether it's journalists and media. Like, this is not something by accident. And I think everybody needs to, when the government has been proven wrong on so many things so often that it's caused vast damage and is marching us towards World War III, the benefit of the doubt should never be given at this point. They need to be vetted at every point. And the reason they never vetted them is because they don't care. They trust these people. It benefited them by profits, by clicks. Who's going to return their Pulitzer Prizes they won pushing this lie? None of them. And people still believe this. They still believe this stuff till this day.
Well, Prodigal, on the military-industrial complex into this thing, let's remember this. Bill Kristol's beyond this. Chertoff was in this. Listen, Bill Kristol's dad went to the Republican Party because the Republican Party was the home of the anti-Russian efforts. And laudable or crazy as that may be, and Bill Kristol has shifted, not so much because he was ever a conservative, and we can question that, but he did move on the very basis you were talking about before, because that is part of this. The Democrat Party nowadays is more fomenting war than the Republican Party, although there are many bad actors there too, like Lindsey Graham and others. But that's also, it's not the main focus of this, but that feeds into this. That's how they've gained some supporters to try to make this look like it's bipartisan or whatever, because you have the Bill Kristol pro-war neocon right that's willing to
Michael
tag
McFaul.
into this.
So I do want to, before I give Aaron, I'll give you the mic next, because I want to get your thoughts, and I'm going to wrap it up shortly as well. Just for the audience, before we start wrapping it up, final thoughts. The pinned tweet above is the newsletter, so make sure you get the recaps there. And quick point, to Ian's point, before I give the mic to Aaron, I do want to say, Ian, that, some journalists are lazy, but when I was looking into the whole Epstein Island, there was some journalists that go above and beyond to make sure a story's not buried, threaten to quit.
Some are good, like Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi, excellent journalist. Barry Weiss, excellent journalist, right? Lee Fang, excellent journalist. The ones who wrote for all these articles in Politico, Daily Beast, New York Times, Washington Post, not excellent journalists. Terrible. The opposite of excellent journalists. Lazy journalists.
The fingerprints of state-sponsored propaganda. We're at a crime scene. Something terrible has happened. It's wrong. everyone acknowledges this is wrong. The fingerprints of state-sponsored propaganda are at the crime scene, because how does that operate? It operates by flooding the zone. In other words, you don't design one or two falsehoods that are exquisitely crafted to be really hard to figure out and really hard to, falsify. No, you come up with thousands of falsehoods, any one of which could be easily discovered to be a falsehood if only someone would have taken the time to check. So the lie that all of these accounts were bots, that could easily, by any competent, not just journalist, but any competent ordinary person, could have been falsified. So why would they put out stuff that could be so easily falsified? Well, you do it at a mass scale. For all we know, only 10% of the stories that they pushed got out there. Maybe, I don't think this was the case, but we don't know. Maybe 90% of the stories the journalists did check and decided not to print them, decided not to run with them, decided not to push them because they were easily falsified. But if only 10% of the stories get out there and you're doing enough of that, that may be sufficient to create that climate of Russian bots and Russian influence and, so on and so forth. So look at the fingerprints and look at the not just the specific instances of this or that happened to get out there that should have been fact-checked, that should never have seen the light of day because it was clearly false. And look at the volume and the scale at which this was done. And, they don't need to bat 1,000 when they do this. They just need to bat, 200-300. And, they're going to win the game.
I mean, look at what they did with him. To back up what you just said, look at what they did when Elon took over the site, right? Literally every single, maybe not literally every one of them, but many of them wrote articles that were negative of Elon Musk. The slightest rumor, like the site will shut down because the servers are unmanned. Like that gets published on 5 different websites. Another article says that he's banning people and he's letting all these white supremacists back on. That's not fact checked, right? It's just there. It's like because they got some quote from some think tank claiming that hate speech has actually increased 300%. What's the methodology? We don't care. We're just putting out a narrative because it's what gets the clicks. An editor sees a thing, sends it to a bunch of writers, or vice versa, and they're like, oh yeah, let's run with it. It's a narrative, right? Anti-Elon Musk. That's the prevailing narrative right now. And back then, in the day, it was Russian disinformation bots. That's what.
All right, let's go with final thoughts because just for the audience, we do have 2 more spaces today. We've got one at 7 p.m. Just breaking down Project Veritas and what the allegations mean, getting a few doctors and trying to get a researcher onto the panel as well. And we'll likely do another space on the
probably not today. Probably not
Tyre
today.
Nichols story. So I'm not sure whether we'll cover it live.
Yeah. We'll see. They're releasing body cam on a black man that was shot and killed, and it might be. We'll see.
So we'll go Brandon.
Wait, are you talking about the Pelosi body cam?
No, different body cam.
No. We'll go with Brandon, Brian, funny. Nick, and of course the co-host right after. Brandon, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say thank you guys for giving me the platform to come up here and say a few words about this. I do actually have to go through and actually read the entire thread because I haven't yet, although a lot of it I kind of already knew because my team and I were studying what Hamilton 68 was saying about us years ago. I guess my only parting words for the audience is that as kind of eye-opening and shocking as some of this is, please don't forget this has very serious consequences to people's reputations, to their lives, to their business, to their organization, to their income. And I'm not trying to put my tinfoil hat on, but I'm sitting here today asking myself, how much did this tie into the way the government has treated me in conjunction with January 6th, which the way they've handled my case is absolutely insane because, it's nuts the way that I've been treated. The last thing I'd like to say, thank you again for having me on the space. Dr. Drew, I see you at the audience. I think you're a really good dude. If you would ever reach out to me and send me a DM, I'd love to chat sometime. Thank you guys so much.
Brandon, I have a question for you. Do you feel vindicated right now?
No. I mean, I feel partially vindicated, but it's, what I've had to go up against the last several years is a mountain that I don't think I could ever possibly climb. I basically just try to look for little victories that I can win. This is one, I think, but if I lived 5 lifetimes, I'd never be able to overcome the damage that's been done to me by the government, by the media. It's insurmountable. I mean, I'll never be able to recover my life to what it was before. Never.
That sort of ties into a question that I just received from Dr. Liza Dunn, just asking, what can we do to ensure this never happens again? I mean, and not just, to right-wingers, but it could happen to the left, it could happen to the right, it could happen to anybody at any point in time. How do we make sure that Twitter, at least, doesn't do this again?
Yeah, I mean, it happened to Bernie Sanders supporters, as the documents reveal, right? It wasn't just right-wingers who were affected by this. Left-wingers were affected too, and I hope they take notice. I think it's very important that everybody come together on this issue, right? It's not a partisan issue. It's not just the right. It's everybody.
Yeah, but Ian, it was effective, right? Because it essentially helped kill left-wing populism, right? So now they only have to worry about right-wing populism. So they're benefiting from this. It's not by accident. And listen, when the CIA essentially, their directors make quotes saying they own anything of significance in media and will know our disinfo campaign is complete when the Americans don't know anything what to believe, right? You have to look at some of these stories, and I'm not going to make it about this, but, when I see all news media organizations say that elections and counting takes weeks, if not months, prior to 2022, after 2020 was the first time we saw that on a national campaign, then you have to start questioning. And you have to look at what the direct documentary evidence and what they're sourcing. And the media failed significantly by just trusting this NGO and their group and not verifying their standards, the methodology, and everything of that nature. So, this is supposed to be the fourth estate. They're supposed to be muckrakers. They're supposed to hold, truth to power and hold them accountable. And they're just an arm of the state. And that's a big problem.
Yeah. And the deep state and the uniparty wins not by convincing all Americans of one side of a debate about Russian disinformation. The purpose of this propaganda campaign was not to convince all Americans that Russia was interfering. It was to create confusion. And we can see that confusion in this conversation. We can see that more questions than answers are created by the release of today's Twitter file. And if they can create confusion, if they can create division, and if they can, wield the sword that destroys people one at a time and makes a public example of them, if they stand up and ask inconvenient questions, then that achieves their purpose every bit as much as convincing the American people of this or that untruth or this or that lie.
Yeah, and I think that in closing, I would say that Hamilton 68, they didn't do it. I don't agree with what they did. I think that creating a list of people based on data that you don't make public is irresponsible. But at the same time, there are Russian influence campaigns on social media. It's proven. There's been indictments. There's been 13 indictments in 2018. They're coming from other countries as well, so it's not just a Russian.
Did you read the NYU study regarding Russian influence in the 2016 election?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what did they find? They said it was minimal at best.
There's evidence that Russia is trying to influence the elections, influence American politics on social media, including Twitter, and other countries as well.
Brian,
there's evidence of that.
If they are trying to influence elections, that's one thing, but whether or not they are actually making any sort of impact is different.
And it was found that they actually had no impact on the 2016 election, and that's important to note. But I'm just saying, when you're out there on social media, realize that other nations are having influence campaigns illegally, and just note that.
Nick.
Yeah, but
Jim, give us
Jim. That were put into shutting down people.
Jim, let's final thoughts, Jim, on the drop. You and Nick, and then we'll go to the co-hosts.
Yeah, well, I just think that, as I said before, I think that we're looking right now at an era in American politics where those intent upon shutting down certain voices for the benefit of other voices, whatever they may be and how narrowly focused or broadly focused they may be, they're able to do it. They're able to do that still on our social media platforms. Twitter is a small part of a whole. Facebook and Google are not being taken into account for the things that they're still doing. And the media itself, as we also found out in this thing, is terribly biased in a way that they're not even reporting any of this. we have a serious time right now in this country, and we're going to have to face this up in a way, or else we might not be able to recover it. I mean, this is a problematic situation. The government is still adept at doing these things that we're reading about in the files, and in a sense, they possibly don't care so much because the revelation's not getting anywhere. It's not getting broad coverage. It's definitely a lot of people are hearing it, and it's very concerning, but it is not dominating what we're talking about right now. And that's concerning because the American people need to push back on this big so that we may maintain our freedom. And I say that not just for the benefit of people like me who fall typically on the right-hand side of the spectrum. This can be used against everybody. We see in some cases it has been. And that is a serious threat to our freedoms in this country. And candidly, it's a serious threat to freedom all over the world, because these same methodologies can be used to meddle in other countries' political.
Where do you think they perfected it? I mean, transparency without accountability at this point is meaningless.
Nick, final thoughts? And then, by the way, I brought you up, Rick.
Sure.
Rick, I know I brought you up. We're going to DM you and organize a space where we bring you up to discuss the messages you've sent me. So I appreciate you coming up. I know you're with your family. So enjoy your family, and we'll have you on a future space, because we do have a pretty big space coming up later today. Just want to give the audience a bit of a break. Potentially 2 spaces. Go ahead, Nick.
One of the biggest takeaways from today, I believe, is who was behind this campaign to push Twitter, to take off these supposed Russian influencers and Russian bots. It was basically, this think tank was a Democrat operation headed by John Podesta, who was one of the top Democrat officials, who was the former chair of the Hillary Clinton campaign. So basically, based on my discussion with Taibbi as well, you're not going to convince me that these people were just stupid and oblivious to what was going on. It seems like this was very much a nefarious operation where they were just trying to silence opposition. Another thing that's worth mentioning, and Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but John Podesta's niece was also mentioned in a previous Twitter files drop.
She worked at Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So they're in very deep on this. I think there's going to be even more that comes along later. But John Podesta was one of the authors of the original Russia hoax and the narrative that came out after Trump won the election. So the fact that he is involved in this think tank that was pushing this information is very telling.
Ian, Tara, by the way, there is breaking news that there's a shooting in Israel. I forgot to mention it earlier. Yeah. 7 people killed in a synagogue in Jerusalem. I was going to mention it earlier, but didn't want to interrupt Matt. But awful. Ian, the mic is yours.
Yeah, I just want to say that, just because foreign influence operations do happen, it's being used as an excuse to clamp down on American freedoms, on freedoms everywhere, on freedom of speech, right? That's the impetus. They take something that's happening on a very small scale that has zero impact and saying, oh, look, this is happening. This is a small, tiny thing. And they're saying, oh, it could be much larger, and we need to protect against it. We need to safeguard against it. We're going to take away all of your freedoms in order to fight against this non-issue. They're just using it as an excuse. So, just because it's happening on a small scale doesn't mean it's happening on a large scale. And they're using that as a means to essentially silence everyone and to promote a single narrative. And they're using this to take down populist groups on the left as well as the right.
Trying to bring up Tara for the final words. Matthew, anything to add? Matthew? All right, guys. So Tara seems to have dropped, and Matthew can't unmute. Final words on my end. I think, there's nothing else I can add to the drop. It was great to chat to Matt as well. The Fauci files that everyone's asking about will be next week. So just a heads up, next week. So in February, probably, I wouldn't say early, I'd say mid-February for the Fauci files.
I mean, sometime next month, mid-February probably, because they have to travel, researchers traveling down to Twitter HQ to actually review the contents personally.
Yeah. So we're going to do a space at 7 p.m. EST regarding the Veritas videos. Project Veritas did great spaces yesterday and the day before. So we're going to focus more on the So there's a lot of people DMing me, like questioning the videos, the authenticity. Not much there. I don't think we're not going to spend much time on that. I think we're going to spend more time on what was said in the videos, because I don't think there's, everything I've looked at, there's nothing that makes me doubt the authenticity of pretty much anything. But yeah, I would love to understand better what that means, for the medical world. The directed evolution, which is
Matthew wants to speak. Yeah,
I don't know what
to say.
I find that, when you get over the 5,000 mark and I'm trying to use my phone at the same time, the Spaces technology does get a little glitchy at times. I don't know if other people are having that.
No, it happens. Matt couldn't.
No,
Matt couldn't hear me,
okay,
and
cool.
I couldn't hear a few people. So yeah, you're not alone.
It's such a powerful forum and medium to just crowdsourcing engagement, ideas, and discussion and debate. So it's great, but there are a few glitches that, in its scaling process, I think our friends over in San Francisco need to work on. Just to heads up on the spaces that I know you guys are organizing shortly. We're going to have some other PV people on. I'm going to be on, and I definitely do not want to belabor the point on the veracity, because we've literally probably spent now about 15 or 18 hours between the two spaces you guys hosted and the two spaces we at PV directly hosted, talking about this and probability adjusting it. And by the way, still not a single word from Pfizer, the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, American Hospital Association, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, not a word. I think that also increases the acceptance, the probability of this is very accurate, because if there's anything fallacious in it, they would be on it like white on rice. So I'm looking forward to this upcoming Twitter space, and good job, Mario and Jim and Nick, for the things you guys are doing on a daily basis. I mean, you're bringing truth and veritas to the Vulgate, as St. Jerome said, which is a beautiful thing.
Thank you, Matthew. And before you jump in, Mario, I do want to mention one more thing. Elon Musk just tweeted out about 25 seconds ago with his statement, an American group made false claims about Russian election interference to interfere with American elections. So take that as you wish.
This guy doesn't hold back. All right, shout out.
Yeah. Sign up for the newsletter as well.
Shout out.
Pin to the top.
Yeah, shout out to Dara. Shout out to Dara as well, who dropped out from co-host. But yeah, appreciate you all. See you all in a few hours, and let's all have breakfast, lunch, or wherever you are in the world. Bye, everyone.
Bye.